What is good, people of the Wrestling Re-Up fam? We are back. Solo Dolo episode here. And apologies for the delay. We had obviously 4th of July weekend just passed by us, so it caused some scheduling delays on top of that. Both Moody and I ended up getting a cold, and so had to push that out for today. But we didn't want to leave y'all hanging. We still have a lot to get through. No Percy's today, but we do have some show notes that we'll probably talk about at the end of this episode. But if not this episode, we'll bring it up next week. But it involves some slight changes in our scheduling and our production as we move forward for the rest of the year. But we have a lot to get through. We have some recaps to get through for NXT Great American Bash, Forbidden Door, and the repercussions of everything as we build on to the next AEW pay-per-view. I think it's called Redemption. And then we obviously have SummerSlam going ahead. But without further ado, episode 104, let's get into it.
Doors opening, step back to allow customers to exit.
Cutting through the crowd, it's Ospreay, Samson, here with my tag team partner, French Rock Bro Moody, off the top rope. And this is the Wrestling Re-Up Podcast, a weekly stroll through the avenue of wrestling. Follow us everywhere on socials, here on this YouTube channel, like, comment, and subscribe, Twitter, Twitch, everywhere at the Wrestling Re-Up Podcast. 104 technically should be our 2-year anniversary if we were just to go by the 52 weeks of the calendar, but I'm pretty sure we started our first episode at like the end of July. But nonetheless, episode 104 did not have time to get quick facts for you for the number 104, but I'm sure that picture that Moody was bringing up about kind of setting records has probably set another record as far as the fastest pitch. But a lot to get through of the week of wrestling of last week. We're going to recap a lot of it. A lot of repercussions coming out of these two pop-up shows. We split points between Moody and I. The first one we'll get through is NXT Great American Bash. Moody ended up getting the win out of that. We agreed on most of these things. We both got correct. Tony D'Angelo retaining against Naraku. Zarya retaining against Tatum Paxley, her North American Championship. We both picked Tristan Angels to get the win over Shiloh Hill. We should have known better than that. Shiloh Hill has been getting a big push, so for us to pick Tristan Angels is more of just favoritism outside of going away from logic. Ren Sinclair, we both got this wrong. We thought the Birthright were going to be holding both speed championships and Ariana Grace was going to get that title belt. But nope, Ren Sinclair ended up retaining her speed championship. And that plays a big part as far as how the rest, what happens later in the show. Saquon Sugars gets the win. And then that was the splitting difference between why Moody got the point for Great American Bash. I had Deion Lennox. I thought he was going to have some type of, continuation as far as making Saquon Sugar's life a little bit harder. The numbers don't lie, but they did in this situation, and Saquon Sugars ended up getting the win. Happy for him to do that. Miles Bourne retaining against Tavion Heights. Pretty clean match as well. Not surprised. We both agreed on that. And then the biggest title change that happened on the card, the only title change to really happen on this card, we both got this correct. We felt it was time. She's had a couple opportunities, and she finally was able to pull it out. Kendall Gray finally becomes NXT Women's Champion, defeating Lola Vice for the NXT Women's Championship. And it was a pretty good episode of pop-up show for Great American Bash. It was on the CW, and if you care about ratings or not, apparently it wasn't doing too well. But again, they're competing against the World Cup and a lot of other things that you can kind of understand, even though I'm sure WWE is still disappointed in that. But overall total show point record for the show itself was I was 4 correct, 3 wrong. Moody was 5 and 2. On the season, I still up to this point, I still have not got a win. I'm 0-3 and 1. Moody's 3-0 and 1. And overall season totals across all seasons, 14 wins for myself, 24 losses, and 17 ties. And the inverse for Moody with 24 wins, 14 losses, and 17 ties. Moving on to the bigger show, AEW Forbidden Door. And this was also a really entertaining show. A lot on the card, and I finally got my first win going through this card. There was a lot on here. We had 9 matches. Starting off with the tag team triple threat of the Young Bucks versus the El Sky team, El Sky team, and Unbound Company. Moody and I both had picked the El Sky team. Just kind of got to give CMLL their win within this area, but nope, the Young Bucks ended up winning that as well. So congratulations to them. Kenny Omega versus Zack Sabre Jr. This was our split. This was our difference. I had Kenny Omega winning, especially because it seems like he's on a collision path with for that AEW World Championship versus Zack Sabre Jr. Moody as Zack. This was obviously a great match, great technical match. Kenny ended up getting the win and helped me get my first win of the season. So thank you, Kenny, for that very much. The rest of the card we all agreed upon. And we got everything pretty much correct. We had a Continental Championship match: Jon Moxley versus Bandito. Jon Moxley getting the win off of that. That was obviously very entertaining. Shota Umino versus Pac for the IWGP Global Heavyweight Championship. Again, when you're going through these cards, especially if you're not familiar with some of the other promotions or workers in the other promotions, and you're looking at when you have kind of 3 companies kind of on one show like this, each company has to kind of get their shine and at least maybe a win. I don't think CMML got a win on here, but this is where New Japan got their win. I was correct, just taking flyer of Shota, and I think I got Moody to change his opinion on that. I think he might have Pac. No, I think he stuck with he had Shota as well, so we both got that correct. AEW Women's Championship, Tekla retained against Starlight Kid. This was also a fun match. Again, not familiar with Starlight, but she put a great match for someone that was unfamiliar with her. AEW World Tag Team Championship match, Cope and Cage versus the Dogs, and Cope and Cage get the win with a surprise return of Switchblade Jay White after 459 days. We will talk more about that when we get to Dynamite, but that was also very entertaining. I thought there might have been upset, but I was not going to play myself on this next match. We had the Women's Owen Hart Cup final, Mercedes Moné with the surprising underdog of Maya World taking off, coming in here in the last minute because of injury concerns for another wrestler, advancing 2 rounds, defeating Athena, who's now 1300A Ring of Honor Women's World Champion. Could she pull off the biggest upset? Close, but no cigar. Again, I would have loved for Maya to get this win, but I was not going to go against the favorite in here, and Mercedes. And Mercedes is now, I believe, the first person to win back-to-back Owen Hart Cup champions, but hopefully she can successfully cash in and actually win the title that's been eluding her AEW career at this moment. And the men's Owen Hart Championship match, Will Ospreay versus Swerve Strickland. All this was building up to being Ospreay at All In his hometown, and that's exactly what we're going to get. There was a huge celebration afterwards. I did see some chatter online, though, about people being very disappointed in this match, especially because it was pretty much an Iron Man match. They went 30 minutes, but apparently, I think at this point I was so tired and exhausted from the day, I think I ended up passing out. But near the end, I think Ospreay, they started hitting their finishers on one another, but they were not selling it at all. And it was like, I think Swerve hit Ospreay with his finisher, and Ospreay just kicked out at like 30 minutes into the match, and that really rubbed people the wrong way. But from what I remember seeing and rewatching it again, this was a very entertaining match, as you could expect, between Swerve and Ospreay getting the win. And let's see if he can get his kind of like Cody Rhodes, finish his story at his hometown and All In a month or so when that happens. And then finally, I had big questions about the logistics of how this match was going to play out, because you have 12 people in a steel cage match. Team Briscoe versus Team MJF. Team Briscoe containing Mark Briscoe, Orange Cassidy, Roderick Strong, Kyle O'Reilly, Konosuke Takeshita, and Darby Allin versus Don Callis MJF, Kevin Knight, Cal Fletcher, Jake Doyle, Kazuchika Okada, and Andrade El Idolo. The cage was different. Obviously, like Moody said, it was not the traditional square cage that was affixed to the apron. This was a much wider one, was surrounded. It actually looked pretty good. Entertaining match. We have finally the turn that we've been alluding to for the weeks of Andrade being kind of annoyed with Don Callis, just kind of dragging him along when he's been asking for his championship, and then also feeling some type of way of having to kind of defend MJF, that he finally had enough and took MJF out and ended up helping the Team Briscoe get the win, which let Mark Briscoe get his championship title shot at Dynamite this past Wednesday, that we will talk about because that was also a great match. But finally, as far as season 3 goes, I got my first win. I was 8-1 on this episode of on this pop up show for Forbidden Door. Moody was 7-2, so I'm 1-3-1 now with 15 wins overall. Finally, I'm so happy about that I didn't go too long. And I'm not even taking chances like I was with season 1. I'm playing it straight. Am I buying some of my bookings sometimes? Sure, but again, I'm not being irrational with it. I could have easily picked Maya, but I'm not going to go against the clear favorite and the storylines that are embedded within Mercedes. So I'm glad I didn't sell my short out and I got my win, and I'm not still looking for it. But those are the pop up shows from last week. And let's get into uh, the Raw recap from the flagship show. And the biggest thing that we had to talk about here, I guess, which started off the show, we both had this as a mid, but Oba Femi comes out, talks about winning King of the Ring and calling out Brock Lesnar, and that ends up having a confrontation, promo battle between one of them. This ends up being a match being made at SummerSlam, as we've been predicting since Oba Femi beat Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania earlier this year, and then they had their rematch back, I believe, at Backlash. That we were going to get Oba Brock round 3 at SummerSlam and Brock's hometown in Minneapolis, Minnesota. But now Brock added a stipulation that we haven't seen in a while. I've been calling for it, and I think this would be a great use of it. Hell in a Cell, which will obviously be super entertaining. The reason why this is mid is specifically for me. I'm not sure, I haven't conversed with Moody about this, but for me, it's the fact that Oba forgoes his world title shot that he was supposed to have at SummerSlam to face Brock Lesnar. So a lot of chatter, and it's understandable chatter, is then what was the point of going through this if you were just going to go take a match with Brock Lesnar for, nothing really outside of just pride and just trying to end the beast and be, the next big thing. I'm still hoping that maybe Oba can have a night 1, night 2 main event like that was saying the last couple of weeks, but I'm really disappointed in the fact that Oba Femi is not going to be challenging for the title at SummerSlam, which leaves questions like what's going to happen with Roman at SummerSlam. Like what's happening with that title? Who's defending that? Smack Raw is in Chicago tonight, and we have a big match that we're going to talk about that. We have Sammy versus Cody Rhodes, and apparently Punk possibly might be coming back because clearly they're in their hometown. But I'm like I said, it's if he still had his title shot at SummerSlam and was going to face Brock, this would have been a primo. But again, for going the championship almost makes what was the point of King of the Ring other than adding an accolade to Oba Femi's mantle of accomplishments that he's had so far being on the main roster. But again, you can't knock like Oba, Brock, SummerSlam, Hell in a Cell. Clearly that is going to be the main event for either probably night 1, because again, we got to figure out what's going to happen with Roman in the World Heavyweight Championship. A primo that I did have that Moody had as a mid, Roman challenging Seth at SummerSlam. Oh, I say all that when literally later on the show, Roman and Seth get set for SummerSlam, and I thought this was a great promo, short and sweet to close out the show. Seth leaning into their history and talking about how Roman hasn't beat him in a long time. They're no spring chickens anymore, so they kind of have to. This might be the last time they might be able to have to do this. And you felt the intensity, the logic, the storyline. Obviously, this is going to be a great match as well. I'm looking forward to it, and it feels like Roman probably gets that on the dub on this. But hey, you never know, maybe Seth might be able to pull it out, and it's kind of like a situation where like Rhea can't be Io, maybe Roman can't be Seth, and you kind of just start building in some of that self-doubt that Roman has, that Roman might cure from not being able to beat Seth Rollins. But yeah, great promo that sets up for another main event, probably night 2. for SummerSlam. So we already got two great matches that we're looking for this summer in the SummerSlam. Oba and Brock Hell in a Cell, Seth and Roman at SummerSlam as well. Really enjoyed that. Other things that occurred, especially in relationship to the Bloodline, we had LA Knight losing to Jimmy. So this is the second week in a row that they fought. Last week, LA Knight got the win after some solo interference with coming out of nowhere, hitting the Samoan spike on his brother. LA Knight getting the win. This week, similar occurs, I believe, but I think that happened after the match. Jimmy Uso ends up getting the win, but you still get Solo coming out of nowhere and Samoan spiking his older brother Jimmy. And it's curious to see what's going to happen with Solo and him possibly eventually. I mean, it seems like it might lead him back into the bloodline, but who knows? I mean, he seems very defiant and not with what's going on with Roman and, still being his own man. But obviously he's been kicked out the MFT. So we'll see what comes out of that. But intrigued by that. Also intrigued by what happens with LA Knight, because he's been saying this from the jump ever since the Usos realigned with Roman Reigns that, hey, we did all this just for y'all to fall back into the same tropes of you doing the Roman's bidding. And they've been getting called out by multiple people for that. Even Cody Rhodes calls them out for that. So interesting to see what happens with the Usos and the rest of the bloodline, Solo and their dynamics. And then again, you gotta have to put into like Jay was supposed to win. He was set on a mission by Roman to win the King of the Ring. Did not end up accomplishing that. What is going to happen with that situation we'll see tonight on Monday Night Raw? Things that we split on. Moody had Chad Gable getting the win over JD McDonough by some Danhausen mix-up. I'm sure a lot of this plays into. I mean, JD and Chad are great wrestlers, and they're also going to put on a great show. But then I'm sure this also gives a much higher plus for Moody, as he is a big Danhausen fan. He's been really digging. So anytime that you can have some additional Danhausen shenanigans play a factor into the show, that will also be a plus for him. And we also got a vignette from Lyra. Last week we saw her, or at King of the Ring, or Night of Champions, I believe, we saw her turn on Bayley. Or maybe it was Raw last week, but we saw her turn on Bayley finally after months of, it seems like they've been kind of at odds with one another. We get a promo for her just kind of explaining how, like, she's not really the bad guy in this situation. I'm curious to see how Lyra plays this character, especially as a heel. I don't think we've really seen her as a heel. So as far as like, a first starting off point, as far as like getting your opinions out and your thoughts, as far as why you're doing you did, I don't think she said anything that you could really contradict how she felt. Like, again, as any good heel would be, it is to kind of, relatable of understanding, like, you might not agree with their actions, but their motivations and their logic within their mind still makes sense. And I thought from just that simple vignette that they had of Lyra explaining her thoughts as far as why she did that to Bayley, can't really disagree with her. I'm curious to see how it plays out and how she gets that character work as a heel over in the next few weeks and months to come. Shakes that we have, I don't have any, but we also have for Moody, we had the Judgment Day ladies beating down EO, so we're continuing that. And then Joe Hendry getting the win over Austin Theory, and Theory keeps pressure on Maxine. We'll see what happens with the Maxine and the Austin Theory. They've kind of loosely been on and off, keeping that on, but maybe based off of the last 2 weeks with Maxine and her attitude towards Chad and not wanting to forgive him, we'll see what happens. But word on the street is the vision might be put to an end, just because of it. Just might be a lost cause at this point, as they there's someone starting and stopping and stalling just because of injuries and that you can't do anything about. But we'll see what happens with the vision and Joe Hendry. Joe Hendry, he's fun. I still like him. I kind of wish there was something more. The concerts are fun, but like they're also like pretty simple. Like it's just kind of just rock concerts where they just kind of make very poignant jokes about their shows and whatnot. So not really sure how the Joe Hendry storyline plays out from here. Glad the Street Profits got it, but again, I think we might need to get him to something a little bit more tangible than what he's been kind of doing, just kind of floating around and just kind of being like, a funny foil to some of these heels. But that is the flagship show for Monday Night Raw. Let's head over to the bodega for the aftermath of the Great American Bash. pretty mid show, but I thought it was still good. There's a lot more. There was a lot more things to kind of chew on here relative to the past few weeks on NXT. We had no primos, but we did have a lot of mids that we all agreed upon. EK Prosper back to back weeks getting the win over Keanu Carver. I love how on commentary with Vic Joseph they were putting it as kind of like a surprise. Again, back to back surprises that EK is getting these wins over Keanu. You have different styles. Keanu, a monster beast, former football player, just all gas, no brakes, as Jacob Fatu would like to say. But EK Prosper is kind of like the second coming of Javon Evans and someone that's very agile. Someone doesn't seems like he should be getting demolished and squashed by someone like Keanu Carver, but surprisingly getting the win. Now it's not all clean. We had Tank and Tank come in or at least believe Tank or Hank, I don't know which one, but one of them came in and interfered and caused Keanu the match. But hey, EK, I'm glad that you're getting these wins, but it also seems like the bill's going to come due when Keanu gets you one-on-one and without any shenanigans to get you to finally get that win over you. Kalani Jordan getting the win over Tatum Paxley. I thought that was really fun. Hopefully this gears up Kalani to getting into the actual world title picture again for the NXT Women's Championship. Tatum finding a new challenger after the match with debuting. No name was given, as typical NXT's been doing when we've had debuts from other promotions coming to NXT. People will recognize her as Nikki Blackheart, but she was given no name, and so there's going to be someone, a name probably introduced this coming episode. She puts her on her torture rack and almost looks like she almost blows out her knee as she's kind of jumping to shake her. Fortunately, she did not, and she was able to regain her balance and just kind of take Tatum Paxley out. But Tatum Paxley, what was once thought, again, rumor had it on the streets a couple weeks ago that Tatum Paxley could be on the call on her way up to the main roster, but she immediately jumped into a quick feud with Kalani Jordan, and now it looks like she's about to get in another feud with a newcomer and Nikki Blackheart, aka, so depending on what her new name will be when she gets put in. But glad to see Tatum Paxley still here, but I'm curious to see how long she remains on the roster. Obviously, they did a whole bunch of call-ups that it seems like you might want to wait a little bit before you call some more people up, but glad for Kalani in here, and hopefully, hey, she's due to get to actually win the title. Though Kendall Gray is going to be holding that title, I feel like, for a good minute. And speaking of Kendall Gray, both Kendall and Tony had promos that we both enjoyed. Kendall was pretty straightforward, simple, just being almost even just not even really much in character, though. I remember I was listening to the Masked Man show or was reading it on the Bleacher Report recap that Kendall was just very honest with her character. She's not really playing character. It's almost just her as just being a wrestler. And she was just giving you like, yeah, I'm not the best promo work here, but I'm being super honest with you that this means a lot to me. And I'm so happy to be here. And I'm going to be a fighting champ and defending it. This, that, and the third. Ren Sinclair was out there. So both women in Ren QCC are holding titles, which is awesome to see. And Tony D also coming out talking about, hey, I'm still here. I did it with one eye. And I here for anybody that wants to smoke. As he's walking out, he has his back turned, and who do we get? That Dr. Evil incarnate, Naraku, comes out of nowhere and smacks Tony D with the chair. So it seems like their rivalry is not also coming to an end as well. But good promos from the champs, especially the new champ, Kendall Gray. Shout outs to her. Shakes that we have for NXT that we both agreed upon. Jada Parker getting the win over Carmen Petrovic. This was really an entertaining match. Pretty easy to see that Jada was going to win, but I think this is more geared to Jada getting over against Natty. Though, again, this has, for me, it has nothing to do with Natty. It's more of just how WWE uses Natty, and I get it. She's almost like kind of like a trainer for the women's division at this point, but I wish there was a little bit more. I wish they came out on top a little bit more rather than just being fodder. And I think that's where I kind of have my concern. I think obviously Jada is going to come up out of this, but it feels like it shouldn't be as easy as Jada just going through Natty's entire. They're kind of like going through the Poke Gyms and going through the entire list of gym leaders in there and, eventually just defeating the main gym leader. And that's kind of seems like the storyline here. I wish there was a little bit more of a struggle for Jada to kind of reach that apex. But again, I guess the story is here that from Natty's perspective, Jada is kind of softened up a little bit, and she's not as the tough badass that she once was, and so she's trying to get that mean aggression that she once had out of her again. So we'll see how that plays out. Other ones that we agreed upon: Jackson Drake getting the win over Mason Rooks. Obviously, we had a lot of Vanity Project interference. Maya Lockwood holding down Mason Rooks' foot as from him and not to be able to kick out of the pin, and then afterwards we get Mason Rooks beating down the Vanity Project afterwards. But I thought the reason I have this, I thought the stare down between Mason Rooks and Myra Lockwood looked really good. That it's almost reminded me of like when Solo and Rhea had that stare down a few years ago on Raw. I'm like, man, I would almost see a match of that. That looked like I would like to see that. That would be dope to see a match if they did intergender matches in WWE. That would be like just from the visual aspect of just seeing Myra Lockwood getting the win over Mason Rooks. Even though you probably give that win to Mason Rooks on that. Finally, we also following that match, we also had Vanity Project in their match. I didn't have this. Booty had this as a shake. They got the win, retaining their tag team titles against Triple A's, Galeno and Dr. Wagner Jr. brothers. And this was obviously entertaining, predictable though as well. So fun episode of NXT. It was a good aftermath episode coming off of Great American Bash and setting up what the future storylines are looking like for the next few weeks going into their next pop-up show. I don't believe they have the name listed for that one yet, but I could be wrong. But that was the NXT recap, the bodega. We're heading over to the coffee shop for the Dynamite recap coming off of Forbidden Door. This was a really good show. We started off super strong with a title match that Mark Briscoe got for defeating MJF in that 12-man cage match at Forbidden Door. Briscoe, as he always he does, is bleeding, putting on a show, doing some great stuff, multiple froggy bows, has MJF outside at the apron, taking off the covering and body slamming him on the concrete, sets up a table, jumps off the top rope off to the table into a froggy bow, putting MJF just taking an ass whipping. But MJF, obviously, and again, part of it is predictability. And again, you can argue, like, you got to say things are predictable, and that's why you put it at mid or a shake. But hey, like we said last week when we were talking about AEW Dynamite for the go home, that whole card was predictable as far as outcomes, but they still gave you quality matches. And this is another one of those cases where AEW does well. Quality match, even if the outcome's predictable, because right after this match, we get a promo from MJF and calling out Kenny Omega. Kenny actually wants to have a title shot. MJF initially declines, but as MJF does, he adds a stipulation of getting MJF, basically doing the same thing that he did with Hangman as far as putting your opportunity on the line in perpetuity for Kenny of challenging for the AEW World Championship. So next week, we both have this as our top mid. MJF, Kenny Omega at Beach Break themed show at Dynamite this week. There's a lot of intrigue because I could see, because we've had a lot of back and forth with Kenny and Will Ospreay. We even had this earlier in this evening where Kenny and Ospreay are having backstage conversations, and Kenny and Will is basically saying, Kenny, you should look out, think about what you're doing, this, that, and the third. But Kenny's like, yo, man, again, similar to what they're saying for the Roman and Seth aspect of it, we're no spring chickens, and I ain't got too much time left that I'm trying to get this title back. I got to do what I got to do. I would not be surprised if you do and if Kenny is able to pull it off this Wednesday and win the title, and then you're set up for Will Ospreay, Kenny Omega at All In. That'd be spectacular. I could also see somehow MJF, through shenanigans, Kenny getting screwed out and having to lose his title shot and never being challenged again. But are you going to do that with two people back to back? I'm not sure, but there's a lot of intrigue of how this could play out. Maybe this ends up into a triple threat. Who knows? But there's a lot of intrigue going into this match on Wednesday between MJF and Omega. I don't know how it plays out, but I would not be surprised if either outcome was to play out. So really intrigued by that. We had the survival of the fittest match between Sheeta, Persephone, Chris Statlander, Harley Cameron, Queen Aminata, and Mika for the new to crown a new TBS championship that was obviously had to be relinquished by an injured Will Nightingale. But we get Sheeta becoming the new TBS Women's Championship, TBS champion. That was a very entertaining match. Some Queen Aminata's reaction to her getting eliminated was also really great, well done as well. Persephone coming in and being a very dastardly heel across the entire match, and then eventually costing Chris Statlander the match when she came through and hit her with the TBS championship to help Sheeta get the win and basically knock her out. So obviously Sheeta's also been playing very much a heel. She's the one who initially brought in the title and then eventually got it taken away from her. But I mean, hey, she's been leaning towards being more of a heel recently. That hey, it's interesting to see how this plays out. And now between these women, you kind of now have a nice group of women fighting for this TBS championship. That I'm very intrigued to see how it plays out in the few weeks and months to come. We got for the first time ever, and it's funny to hear the commentators kind of announce this, but they were saying it was the first time ever Mox and Ospreay being on the team, but they were also saying Ospreay is officially a member of the Death Riders, and I'm like, I was assuming that since the moment that he's just been hanging out with Mox the entire time, but I guess Ospreay is officially now a Death Rider. But him and Mox teamed up to face Shane Taylor Promotions, and obviously got the dub, and they look great as a tag team. I would not be surprised in the near future if Ospreay and Mox do become AEW World Tag Team Champions. But again, thinking about All In, where does Mox play into Will Ospreay's ambition to getting the AEW World Championship? Is he going to cost them? Is he going to help them? Who knows? It's interesting to see what Ospreay's relationship with the Death Riders is. Ospreay going to pull a Stone Cold at WrestleMania 17 and turn heel fully? And because again, the Death Riders at this point, as we'll get to when we talk about Jay White and his promo that he had earlier in the night, they're initially heels. They're supposed to be heels, but they put on great matches. They do some great character work. That are they really heels anymore? They're kind of tweeners. And so it's very interesting to see how this will play out and where they're going to actually be defined, whether they're faces, or are we going to go back and say, no, these are heels. So I'm still intrigued to see how this relationship between Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega fully plays out. But right now, I would not be surprised if Will Ospreay makes the full heel turn. And if it is Kenny versus Will at All In, maybe Will just does something super dastardly to Kenny that it's just unforgivable. And now we know that, okay, the Death Riders are clearly heels. Ospreay's a heel, Moxie's a heel, all of them are heels. And, it's a whole new era for what we're about to see. Split on these mids. I have this as a mid. Moody has this as a shake. But Andrade getting beat down by the Don Callis family. I just love the promo out of it from Andrade, and just kind of again being a legit threat and being someone that I can see in the near future possibly. I mean, maybe not in the near future, but I feel like within the year possibly I can see Andrade winning the title. He's been doing some great character work, and his promos have been really entertaining. And then again, he's been a favor of just someone that you can root for. That again, with this heel turn, he needs to be a little bit more defined as far as being involved within the main title scene. But I'm very intrigued to see how Andrade's story arc plays out, because I think he's been, ever since he's returned to AEW, I think he's been doing some really great stuff. And he got beat down by the Don Callis family afterwards, and Don Callis just being, a chump. Brian Cage, I'm not sure what his body type used to look like, but I've heard ever since he's returned, he's just looks super brolic, and obviously he looks super brolic. Seems like he's been working out with Pac, but him and Brian Cage had a match. Andrade and Brian Cage had a match on Dynamite, not Dynamite, Collision later in the week, with Andrade getting the win. Other mids that we had, that Moody had, Kevin Knight retaining over Leo Rush. If anything, I probably have this as shake. Predictable, but I'm also like, I like Leo Rush's character. It just for a long term, like for it just doesn't fully work for me. I get what he's doing. There's elements that are entertaining. It's not like I don't like it. It's not like anything like how Moody doesn't like Hang Tank or like Shiloh Hill doesn't get over with me. I think Leo Rush's character definitely gets over with me. It's just I can only take it in short bursts and not for anything longer than like a 5 minute promo or like a TikTok clip. Anything longer than that, I'm like, okay, this is a little bit too much for me. But he's doing great stuff as well. Obviously, great athletic men on both sides between Kevin Knight and Leo Rush, but Kevin Knight was not losing this title as well. And then, yeah, finally, last thing that we want to talk about on the Dynamite show was Jay White cutting a quick promo talking about him returning after 459 days and the Bang Bang Gang being back and how, he's setting out his ambitions. Again, mentioned him talking about the Death Riders. When he was there initially before he had left, they were one of the biggest people that the fans couldn't wait to get rid of. And then all of a sudden now it's like y'all seem like y'all don't even want them to leave anymore. So he's setting out his ambitions and him and the rest of the group his ambitions as far as what they want. But it was a quick promo. It was good to see Jay White back and see how he gets involved because again, even before we were leaving, I was saying, bro, it seems next in line to be AEW World Champion. But excuse me, there's a lot of people in the road now, especially with MJF, possibly Mox, Will Ospreay, Andrade, as we're talking about. Now you're in Jay White and other people that might be coming through. But great show for AEW Dynamite. We have another great show for them this Wednesday with the theme night at Beach Break. And like I said, I'm very intrigued about how this MJF and Kenny Omega match plays out. I hope it doesn't start off the show, and I hope it closes it out and they just give them like 20 minutes, 30 minutes commercial free. Let it go, man. Let it go. And I just can't imagine Kenny not. I mean, it made it sense more for Hangman, but to have both Hangman and Kenny just eliminated makes sense from an MJF character's perspective. But as a booking perspective, I don't know. I don't know. But maybe that's also me just tying into the fact that I had future booked Kenny Omega winning the AEW World Championship at World's End at the end of the year, completing the entire story arc that he started this back in January, and I'm like, nah, just wait till the end of the year, and somehow you end up getting the championship on the last day of the year at World's End. But maybe that's just me just trying to believe in my own booking as much as you guys know me to do. But that is it for the coffee shop. Let's head over to the gallery for the book of wrestling. 2 items in the book of wrestling here. We'll start with the earlier one. Well, not the earlier one, but the more recent one. July 2nd, 2001. Somebody's got a concussion. If you've seen Will Smith's concussion, you know what I'm referencing. The main event of the WWF Monday Night Raw at Tacoma Dome in Tacoma, Washington featured the first ever WCW match on WWF television. WCW had been bought out by the WWF in March of that same year. The match saw Booker T defend the WCW Championship against Buff Bagwell and is remembered for all the wrong reasons. Bagwell was wrestling in his first match in months and quickly ran out of steam. The crowd were chanting, quote, boring, and, quote, this match sucks throughout. The loudest cheers came when Stone Cold Steve Austin and Kurt Angle, both heels at the time, attacked Booker T. It was Bagwell's one and only WWF match and was named the most awkward match in WWE history by WWE.com in 2013. I remember watching this live, and yes, this was not even just the setup for this because they used like the last hour to basically change the entire theme of Monday Night Raw into like this new show. Because again, at the time they were trying to spin off WCW into a new show, and they were using like the second hour or the last hour of Raw, or maybe like the last 30 minutes as like a WCW exclusive show. This clearly did not work off rip. And even when we talk about in this quote of Stone Cold and Kurt Angle running out to attack Booker T, that was a last minute thing that I've heard on numerous, I think, JR and Bruce Pritchard podcast mentioning Vince being in Gorilla, just saying that, like, nah, bro, like, we got to end this. And sent both of those guys out to basically just tell them to wrap it up because this was not working. And yeah, obviously, clearly, we never had a WCW show spun off of that, and this was one of the reasons why. But I'm glad to see Booker T was able to succeed after that and set himself to be even more iconic than he was initially in WCW. And our second item in the Book of Wrestling this week was on July 4th, 1993, Lex Luger slams Yokozuna. Lex Luger arrived by helicopter and landed aboard the USS Intrepid battleship in New York City. The reason? He was answering the challenge set by the 627-pound Yokozuna that no one could body slam him. Wrestlers and sports stars alike lined up to lift the big man. Rick and Scott Steiner, Tatanka, Crush, Randy Savage, as well as NBA players Scott Burrell, Bill Fralick of the Detroit Lions, and Joe Morris and Peter Leon Tagalani. Totally butchering that. Sorry about that, Peter. Of the Pittsburgh Penguins. All tried and failed. Just as it looked that Yoko had the challenge won, Luger arrived, decked out in the stars and stripes, hit Yoko with his and steel plate infused forearm, hoisted him up and slammed him to the canvas. Basically, WWE's version of Andre being body slammed by Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 3. This is obviously being a 4th of July thing and just pro America and things of that nature. But, you know, memorable, but not as iconic moment. But I remember seeing this clip, obviously being sprayed throughout a lot of WWE content throughout the years when they're going back on, you know, looking back on their history. But that is it for the gallery in the Book of Wrestling. Let's head to the final show of last week's episodes, SmackDown, and the primo, almost top shelf, but I'm not going to go that high, but just, it's so good to be back to 2 hours of SmackDown because, Jesus, these 3-hour SmackDowns are exhausting. And it's funny because Raw technically can move up to 3 hours. They haven't really done it that often. I feel like they've only done it maybe once or twice, but Raw is technically can be 3 hours because they're on Netflix, but they tend to last about 2.5 hours. But SmackDown, because they're on cable, they have to use a lot of time slot they are paying for. So it is from 8 to 11, and that last hour is just super exhausting and so much wrestling. Obviously, it sucks because you're getting less people onto the show, but as far as pacing, 2 hour SmackDown is a primo here, and Moody says this might be his outside looking in why it might be an episode of the year for him for SmackDown. But I just really enjoyed that. Really enjoyed the Rey Fenix and the Kingo match for the AAA Cruiserweight Champion, Light Heavyweight Championship, Light Heavyweight or Cruiserweight. Either way, great match. Didn't think Rey Fenix was going to lose this, but obviously with two talented men doing some great lucha work in this ring, you knew it was good. That's again predictable outcome. We're not just doing it for AEW. We do it for WWE. We're equal opportunity. Great predictable outcome. Great match to watch. If you haven't seen it, go back and watch the Rey Fenix Vikingo match. That was awesome. Also, Sami Zayn cutting his first promo as WWE champion after defeating Gunther and Cody Rhodes at Night of Champions. Sami was once the hunter, now is the huntee, or once was the hunter, now is the hunted. I thought this was a really good promo from Sami. You know, there was obviously some real sincerity as him being, you know, Sami, the actual person, relative Sami, the character. But, you know, you spring in some of the character work. He does, you know, he's a pro. He's been doing it for a while. He did that great. Called Cody out. Cody came out, gave him his flowers as he was leaving. Sami's like, nah, bro, where you going, man? We ain't done yet. Talking about Cody wants to get his rematch, eventually get Jey Uso, because, again, he's all here on a mission from Roman Reigns to, you know, handle business with the title. I thought it was really great that Jey talking about how he wants to bring the title back to the family. And the whole time I'm watching this, I'm like, bro, Sami's still bloodline. You know, I got the honorary U shirt. You know, what are you talking about? And saying for Sami to say that he still thinks like the title is still with the family. I don't know what you're talking about. So I thought that was really good. But eventually, and this is my Reggie, Moody called this as his champion, but it's like a champion Reggie. But I haven't said this in a while, but hey, man, I got to bring this back. Nick Aldis is out after having a confrontation with Gunther backstage after Night of Champions. So he wasn't at the show, and Adam Pearce was in charge of SmackDown. This is why Adam Pearce sucks as a GM, all in kayfabe. Adam Pearce sucks as a GM because how you gonna come on to another show that you're temping for, and then taking the world champion and having him fight defend his title on your show on Monday night? That makes absolute no sense unless you're trying to steal. You're just stealing work from SmackDown. That is ridiculous that Adam Pearce did that, and he should pay for that, especially when Nick Aldis eventually comes back. But we get set up from Adam Pearce that later in the night and the main event, Jey Uso versus Cody Rhodes, the determinant number one contender for Sami Zayn's WWE Championship, which would be defended tonight on Monday Night Raw in Chicago. Jey Uso ends up losing to Cody Rhodes. We get Cody, we got Sami at Monday night tonight in Chicago. Anytime you're in Chicago, you also got to think about where's CM Punk and could that be an interference? Maybe Jey Uso kind of comes in and causes interference. Who knows? But should be an entertaining match. I don't like that Adam Pearce took that match and put it on his show Monday Night Raw. That is some grimy stuff that I hope Nick Aldis, when he comes back, choose Adam Pearce out for that, because you should not be able to take the WWE, force the guy that is on schedule to be on Friday to go and fight on Monday on your show when he's not even supposed to be there. That's overstepping your boundaries as a temp GM. Do not like that. That's a Reggie for me, but we'll get to Moody. He'll define that as his champion of the week for him as a Reggie. But yeah, that was great as well. I really enjoyed, and we both had this as mid, the Trick, Yachty, and Mello promo. Short and sweet, but I did like that. Again, I said this about Trick. I'm like, technically, Trick is kind of a tweener at this moment. Like, he does great character work where it's just so likable that you can't not watch Trick and enjoy Trick, and especially when he has Yachty and their intros and everything. Yachty's been doing great on the promo work. Yachty's been one of the better celebrity involvements that we've had, probably since Bad Bunny in the most recent, but he's putting himself up there as one of the top celebrity involvements in, I guess, WWE history, I would say. But I like that we're defining Mello and Trick, because Mello was calling out Trick on some, hey, ever since you won this U.S. title, all it's been an accessory, and I'm the one that put the respectability to the U.S. title, and I'm going to bring it back once I beat you at SummerSlam. So getting hyped for this Trick and Mello, obviously a lot of history between these two guys. They already know that they can get down with one another, but that should be a great match, and I like that we're defining it. Trick ends up doing his Black Dynamite backhand slap. But Mello ends up getting the last word, jumping out the ring and knocking out both Mello and Trick as the segment ended. But hey, I'm ready to see the next few weeks build up as we gear up for Trick versus Mello at SummerSlam. But that was a very entertaining segment. And we also get Lainey Reed getting the win over Brie Bella, and Moody quoting that, damn, that was stiff. This was, I didn't really have this anywhere, I'm sure, but because, again, surprised, I guess, Lainey got the win over Brie, but again, I think we have been putting over the Brie and Paige tag team the last few weeks, that it's about time, like someone on the Fatal Influence getting a win, and it was nice to see Lainey get the win off of that, but I didn't really have anywhere of that, but I think where Moody has this as a mid, if I was to speak for him, is because of some of the stiffness that we saw in this match. But rocking out to the end of our shakes. Couldn't miss segments for Moody. Blake, Julia, and Kiana. I actually did like this because, again, Julia and Kiana, Julia and Kiana having their differences, eventually splitting. Julia finally turning face on Kiana, taking her out, but then out of nowhere, you get it finally debuting Blake Monroe, taking out Julia. Initially makes you think that she's aligning with Kiana. That doesn't happen as Blake comes out backstage, takes out Julia. Kiana comes out through talking smack to Julia. Out of nowhere, Blake comes back, takes her out, and so hey, you got Blake is all by herself on this, and so she ain't teaming up with Julia. She's not friends with Julia, obviously, and she's definitely not teaming up with Kiana. So it's going to be interesting to see how she establishes herself in the next few weeks after finally debuting. He also had Priest and Truth and the War Raiders and Tama and Finn. To me, flew over my head, so I cannot really speak on that. We get Danhausen versus JD McDonough set for Saturday night's main event. Are we finally going to see who's under the cover of them doing their experiments, quote unquote? Not quote unquote, but rumor has it could be a returning Baron Corbin to the WWE. Let's see, but Saturday night's main event, I believe, is if not next week, it's in a couple weeks from now. I think it's the 28th. So we'll do our predictions. They obviously Saturday night's main event predictions do not count towards overall prediction scores records, but we will be talking about that in the next few weeks. But I believe that's one of the only matches I think that has been listed for Saturday night's main event. I could be mistaken though. And then finally, we had a triple threat, 3-on-3 match of the baddies of Jade, Michin, and B-Fab getting the win over Chelsea, Tiffany, and Charlotte. Typical match, typical feud. We've been seeing this. It almost feels a little overly repetitive at this standpoint. I'm kind of wishing that we get something a little bit more progressive as far as like progressing the storyline forward or establishing something. So not a bad match per se. It just seems like we're kind of just going through the motions here, and it just seems like the same stuff that I've seen the last 3-4 weeks with these women. And none fault with the match, just by the books, and none really else to kind of call out. But that is it for the shows for the week, and we will get into our champions, and I'll get to Moody's because this is right off of we were just talking about for Adam Pearce, as I gave him the Reggie, and this is basically a Reggie title for Adam Pearce. If you are familiar with the famous meme of "I'm just here so that I can witness that my ops is actually dead" champion, what Moody quoted as the RIP Bozo title to Adam Pearce, because again, how are you going to be temping as a general manager on SmackDown, but then end up forcing the champion to fight on your show on Monday? Nah, Chief, that ain't cool. That ain't cool. And I'm hoping when Nick Dallas comes back, the better GM, the best GM, comes back and handles his business as far as Adam Pearce overstepping his boundaries as far as what he should be allowed to do as far as the talent that is on Nick Aldis's roster, and forcing them to come on to his show at a Spurs moment because you want to plus up your show that you don't even have control, and you're always over your head, and you need a drink and this, that, and the third. I've said for numerous times, Adam Pearce needs to get in control of his show. And no, he doesn't. What do? We give him temp status of GM on SmackDown, and then now you're taking the WWE champion and forcing him to defend his title on your show. Ridiculous, Nick Aldis. That's why you're the RIP Bozo champion of the week. Adam Pearce. That's a Nick Aldis. Adam Pearce. That's why you're the champion, Bozo champion of the week. My champion is this is probably and new champion, because we've said this numerous times, but this is the I Am the Table title to Sky Blue versus the Table. So Sky Blue was, I believe, at an indie show, Eve indie show, and she was in a match. Looks like it was a hardcore match. She tried to put her opponent through a table. Table does not break. Sky Blue eventually ends up winning the match, but the table is still set up. So eventually, Sky Blue, to just, appease the fans, is just like, I'm just going to put myself through the table. Gets on the turnbuckle, the second turnbuckle, and tries to jump through it. Table doesn't break. Goes back up again to the top turnbuckle, jumps through it again. Table doesn't break. And clearly she was just annoyed. And at the second time, she literally was like, okay, my back is starting to hurt a little bit. She was like, and the crowd was like, F the table. And she was like, you took the words right out of my mouth. But it was a very funny scene. Shows Sky Blue's, love for the business, and her to just give herself for the body, and just like, hey, I don't even need to put somebody through the table, but we all want to see a table broken. Unfortunately, the table was like, no, I am the table, and that's why you get the I Am the Table title, Sky Blue. Congratulations. And that is it for us at the Wrestling Re-Up for episode 104. We will be back Saturday, possibly. So talk about this right now. There could be some production adjustments that we're making on the show. So naturally, we try to record on Saturdays, but we're thinking about adjusting that to doing it on Sundays. But with that, we don't want to miss out on possible points when WWE has pop-up shows on Saturdays. So in the case that there is a pop-up show, such as SummerSlam Night 1 will be on a Saturday, we will come on here on Saturdays, give our predictions for Night 1, recap Night 1 or that pop-up show on Sunday, and then make the rest of predictions on our Sunday, and we'll go through the full show on the Sundays. But we will keep you posted on any adjustments on the show. Sorry for the delay. 4th of July weekend really got us this weekend, but we will be back at our regularly scheduled programming. Thank you for everyone for joining on the Wrestling Rehab podcast. We will catch y'all next week with the duo. Moody will be back next week, but thank y'all. Peace. Catch y'all next week.